This is 91.3 FM, WCW in Worcester, Massachusetts, the Dr.Chris Radio of Horror program. And tonight on Radio of Horror, as we cover once in a while, we've been covering a lot lately. Like in comic books, we've had some great comic book people on the show. We decided to have someone on the show that really gets into comic books heads like we do. We have from the famous YouTube series Comic Pop, Sal. Thank you for coming on the show with us.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
All the way from the Garden State in New Jersey, which is filled with comic book stuff like Kevin Smith.
Yes. The man himself.
Have you been to his store?
Oh, I took the pilgrimage in 2000 was the first time I went, and I have gone back at least twice a year, every year, for 16 years.
I went in 2005. My ex-wife, it was my 25th birthday present, and we were like, we're gonna go on a road trip to Graceland in New Jersey.
Yeah. I'll tell you, man, I love that store. I love that town. I love Red Bank, New Jersey. I go there a lot. Sometimes I go there like as like a love letter to myself as a teenager. I'll be like, all right, we'll pop into the stash really quick. But what I really want to do is go to like Yestercades and play arcade games for 2 or 3 hours. I love the stash. I've been going there forever. We actually got a chance to shoot an episode of one of our shows on our YouTube channel, Comic Pop, called Off the Rack at the Stash with Ming Chen and his friends.
Uh-huh.
And that was fun.
And you've been to Quick Stop too, right?
Oh, I don't go to the Quick Stop as often because it's in Leonardo and it's like right off the highway.
Yeah, we drove out there first.
Yeah, I went there. The first time I went there, I was like, that's it, huh? And actually, it's funny. Back the first time I went, first of all, it's incredibly small. Secondly, when I went, the RST video store was still open.
Oh.
And now, of course, like every video store, it's no longer with us. But when I went in there, this very lovely Indian lady was working with the register.
Yeah.
And we were talking with her, and literally, my friend and I, we walk through the door, and we just looked like I felt like we didn't have our Kevin Smith costumes on. You know, like I was just wearing jeans and a t-shirt. We just walk through the door, and she goes, "Oh, are you guys Clerks fans?" And I go, "Jeez, is it that obvious?" She looks at me and just goes, "Yes." And I'm like, "Fair enough." Thank you. So ever since then, I've been very heightened. I've been heightened aware. I've had a heightened awareness about like what I wear and where I wear it.
Now, to not continue professing our love for Kevin Smith in every which way, of course, he's really relevant in the news right now because Yoga Hoser's trailer just came out, where his daughter, Harley Quinn, and Johnny Depp's daughter fight Nazi sausage gnome people?
Bratzies, as I remember.
Yes.
Yeah, man, I saw the scene that he released, which was like just a 2-minute moment from Yoga Hosers of like the girls behind the register interacting with like boys their age, and you know he talks about it as a movie like it's a movie for like 12-year-old girls, and I'm like I can't really judge it. I'm not a 12-year-old girl. But that said, I think it's really sweet that he's making a movie with his daughter. As I remember, he was talking about making Mallrats 2, and he wanted to put her in that, and I was like, cool, okay, I'm with you there. Like, I'll go see Mallrats 2. Yoga Hosers, I will see maybe, but with the caveat of like, I know it's really not for me.
Yeah. And he talks about how like going up to Johnny Depp was like like he always talks to Depp as like a parent and a friend, but never in business. And he finally says, "Hey, I got a question. You are so above my stature." And Depp was like, "Are you kidding? Nobody does that because I'm so huge."
Yeah, exactly.
And he knew if he went to his agent would be like, "Don't do that script. That's the guy who with the kryptonite condom questions and Clerks."
As I understand it, like he approached Haley Joel Osment for the role of one of like the key Bratzies, and Haley Joel Osment's like yes, and his agent called back and was like no, and you know.
Sometimes it's easier to go through like to talk to celebrities and stuff like that. Now I know you guys don't do a lot of interviews on your show, but
we used to do a lot more, but we just noticed that part of the YouTube landscape is, especially in comic books, you know, our fans want to know about either the characters or us, and they don't really care too much about what the creators have to say, which I'm always amazed by, because you know, interviewing creators is a very, very interesting and rare experience. You get to like get insight into their approach to characters that you like have such an adoration for, and like I feel like sharing that with our audience would be beneficial and celebrated, but for some reason, they don't really quite disconnect the idea that Batman doesn't do anything without the people who write him,
Yeah.
and they're the ones with the stories that they like so much. But I don't know.
Thanks. I'll
For
stop
whatever
doing
reason.
all interviews now for my channel.
Well, thanks for having me. I'll see you later.
I literally just made an announcement like last week saying, you know what? I've been terrible at reviews. I can go on and on a tangent about comic books or or like The Darkness that just came out, but ask me to be like, oh, the cinematography and the so on and so forth and the acting and blah, blah, blah. No, I can't do it anymore. I'm talking to myself most of the time since I left my co-host, and I decided, you know what? I've been doing this for like the last year. It's just been music and interviews in my show. I'm just going to do that from now on. I'll write a little review about some stupid product or do an unboxing like I did with the Lady Death thing, which Brian Polito really appreciated.
Nice.
Because he saw the video and he's like, oh, that's really cool, man. I really appreciate that. I've noticed your name is on a lot of the Kickstarters, so I really appreciate that too. And now that brings up a really great question about your show. Is you guys haven't covered, like, there were some things I noticed, like for instance, the big part of your show, of course, is back issues, and you guys haven't done Thor.
Covered Thor, and that is actually just because
There hasn't been a movie in theaters yet.
no, it's I mean, like, we do coordinate some of our episodes to go in line with like releases, but for the most part, I just do episodes of shows or I just do episodes of books that I want to do, like, or that I'm thinking of, or that I think, oh, it'd be amazing would be this episode or this book or this comic. There is a Thor book that I want to do, and it's J. Michael Straczynski's run, or at least the first couple volumes, because I only read the first couple volumes.
Like, and how disconnected was that in the end?
Oh my god! Well, like a lot of JMS books, like, it just kind of went off the rails. But it starts really strong, and I really, really dug it, and I was so on board. And
it was those scenes where interacting with the town, and the guy's like, you raised Asgard out of land that I own.
Technically, I own Asgard.
Yeah, and Thor's like, do you believe I owe you penance for this? And Thor's like staring him down, and he's like,
empty the treasury and with whatever you can carry.
Or how about later on when they relaunched the Mighty Thor, they did that story where Galactus comes to Asgard to eat it, and then he takes a priest as his new herald. Whatever happened to that priest?
I don't know. I mean, like, you could just say Secret Wars and just move on.
Well, I think I'm led to believe that it was some story I didn't read. The Herald got killed off, and then that's around the time that Age of Ultron happened. So then Galactus got sucked into the Ultimate Universe.
Yeah.
Fights the Galactus of the Ultimate Universe is just like, you're a swarm from that awful movie.
He's augmented by the Galactus swarm, and he becomes like Ultra Galactus or some Voltron nonsense. I mean, but yeah, I want to do more Thors. We actually, thankfully, we have an amazing fan base that is so supportive and wants to see us talk about books that they love and hold dear.
Or hate.
So we've actually received a couple of books that are Thor related. I can't remember who wrote it, but it's the one with that Assad Ribic drew.
Yeah, and
we got the first 2 volumes of that, and so I just have to read it. Like, the whole conceit of Back Issues is I explain, comics that I read as a kid or as a young adult to 2 guys or one guy and one girl who didn't grow up reading them and have no context for the characters or for the stories. And if I didn't read it, it rings inauthentic if I try to cover it.
Is that like for instance, Sandman? I brought that up to you when we met at PAX East. I was like, you gotta do Sandman for at least Halloween.
Okay. So there's a couple of reasons why we do or do not do certain episodes. I mean, like, for example, Daredevil dies on our channel for some reason. Yet, when there's a new season of Daredevil, you can bet your boots there's going to be a Daredevil episode. Because I grew up reading Daredevil, I like Daredevil, I think the character's cool, and there's some cool stories, damn it, and we're going to do them. But at the same time, there are some characters that just don't perform, or who I feel like won't perform based on empirical data. Like, for example, I would love to do an episode on The Max by Sam Keith. I can't, because Back Issues is our flagship show. It is the main draw for the channel, and it will die on the vine. And that's just based on different large-scale cult-following independent books that we've done, a la Spawn or Gen 13, wherein they just don't succeed as well as some of the big tube titles. Such as it is with Sandman. I want to talk about Sandman, but I'm concerned that it wouldn't perform as well as something that I might have more context for. So we have an independent show that covers that kind of stuff, and I kind of want to do more retro. Like, I want to put Tiffany into that like world and be like, hey, you do like Constantine Hellblazer, like you do Sandman, like you do those like Vertigo titles that, while they've been over for 30 years, people might want to go back and enjoy them. So,
or next month when Preacher at the end of the month when Preacher launches.
We should definitely do something Preacher related, and I happen to have a huge love for Preacher, as does Ben. In fact, one of the problems with the show nowadays is like, it's about two guys who don't read comics. Well, some of these guys have read the comics since then. I've done too good a job, and I've pitched this industry, and now they really like dig some of them, and we have to avoid those titles because otherwise, the show would become three guys who all read the same comic and would all just agree with each other, and that's not nearly as interesting. So, with Preacher, we're just gonna have to like figure out another way to approach it, and thankfully, because Comic Pop is not just the one show, we make 5 different shows, and they're all very, very different. Or rather, we have 5 different time slots per week, and we occupy many different shows within those time slots. We could do a Preacher special, and it wouldn't necessarily be inappropriate or out of left field for our audience. They wouldn't be like, "Why are you doing an episode about Preacher?"
No, you cuss and swear enough anyway, so it's totally fine.
Oh my god, yeah. Our channel is while we're not necessarily as family friendly as others. It's funny. We have a very, very diverse group of people who watch this channel, and a lot of them are maybe a little too young for the language we use, but they get it, and you know what? They're on the internet, and they're gonna find it anyway.
Dude, I work at a used bookstore, and I'm alone pretty much 99.9% of the time by myself there or whatever. So I throw on like either I'm not like. It's really hard for me to get into music while I'm kind of standing still and doing something. If I'm reading, that's fine. Music is fine. But most of the time, if I'm like busy or whatever, and when the customers come in, I have on like iTunes with podcasts, whatever, or I'll have on create the playlist on YouTube with back issues, and I'll throw that on there. It just makes these random comic books, and people come and go, "What are you listening to?" Like,
what are these guys? Well, because that's the thing is that the conversations and the personalities are the reason I do the show and the reason why we talk about certain things. And I feel like if we weren't true to ourselves, we wouldn't be making a genuine product.
Mm-hmm.
And we say some pretty ridiculous things, or we say some pretty like hardcore things. And I feel like all of it's, maybe we're saying it hyperbolically, or maybe we're being a little bit more ridiculous than, is appropriate for the subject matter. But I think that, there's a call for that. We're like the shock jocks of YouTube comics.
Now, before we get back to the super geeky stuff, which is always fun to talk about, I want to get serious for a second. Sure. When someone is trying to create their first YouTube channel, and there's still so much market to still do it, what would any advice you'd give them to be? How do YouTube channels make money off of monetization? Do you have to encourage people to watch the whole commercials that are played, or does it skip over it? Does it hurt the channel if you're trying to support it?
It's funny. I'm actually kind of learning that lesson myself, because YouTube is an ever-evolving, ever-changing platform, and what is true 2 years ago is not true today, and what is true today will probably not be true in 6 months from now. So, there are a few inalienable things you gotta be able to do. There's some things that you got, like consistency is key. Putting out a show. If you're gonna put out a show once a week, you make sure you hit that time frame. If you're going to say you're going to put out 5 shows a week, you better put out 5 shows a week. And then of course there's branding that's involved. Like, make sure that your audience can find you throughout the different various social medias. And with respect to your shows, make sure that they're not too long, but not too short. I've been told when we first started doing back issues, the show was 45 minutes, which is not unlike every episode of back issues, which is between 45 minutes and an hour and 12 minutes.
Mm-hmm. If you do the Clone Saga, it would be like 3 hours.
If we do the Clone Saga, it might be... the funny thing is, you could skip a lot of stuff in the Clone Saga. I could do it. I feel like I could probably pull off the Clone Saga in one episode. People would be annoyed we left out, like, the Scryers or Spider Side, but there's no way that, because I mentioned those, that I'm going to leave those out. It's just that we won't spend 20 minutes talking about them.
You should do it like comic...
I'll cut them out and put them in Tangents, which is another show that I created that's so great because... back issues is so long, it's so robust, and we go on so many different tangents haha, in the show, that we're able to then pull some of those moments that are really, really good, but might derail the show or might not be applicable to the conversation at hand, and then we just put that out, and then that's a more digestible episode of a show, so that people can like see what we're all about, but maybe they don't have 45 minutes, but they do have 2, and then they're going to watch the 2-minute episode and go, you know what, that's funny, I like those guys, I like what they have to say, I could watch them for another 25, 30 minutes.
And it's not like you have to watch your channel either. I mean, a lot of it's like dialogue. It's people sitting on a couch.
We had a meeting one time with a channel manager who said, for the most part, nobody's watching your show. That's the bad news. But the good news is they're listening to the show, and so the fact is they're just minimizing it. So, you know, don't get hung up on this, this, and this. And it's like, okay, cool. But at the same time, I also like, you know, my first love when it came to making YouTube shows was editing. You know, we shot so much stuff when I was like a kid, like a teenager, with you know, mini VHSs and DVs, and throughout college I was like, let's cut this together and make like a kind of reality show out of it. And then, you know, we got a handy cam, upgraded the equipment, and shot even more stuff. And I just was like, maybe I can take this like full day's worth of footage and cut it down into a watchable 5 to 10 minutes. And that's the jury's still out on whether that was watchable, but the fact is I learned how to make, you know, art through video and through editing. And so that's something that I like to do. And while, you know, maybe 25% of our audience actually watches back issues as opposed to listens to it, I'll take it. You know, I like cutting the show. I like how it looks. I like, you know, I like getting new equipment or changing the set, or, you know, we're learning how lighting works. You know, it's an ever evolving process that I'm so proud to be a part of and get to do full time. And, you know, it's a lot of fun to like play with the visuals, even if, you know, it's lost on 70% of our audience.
How come you guys moved from the comic book store to, I'm assuming that's your house?
Yeah, it's my house. We shoot in a designated space that I've created specifically for the show. It just so happens to involve like a 70-inch television, which we've bookended with, you know, actual books or bookshelves. And, you know, actually it's inspired almost entirely by the SourceFed Nerd set. There's another channel called SourceFed/SourceFed Nerd. They had a show called Comment Commentary, in which they sat on a couch and they were bookended by shelves. And I'm like, that looks great. And it's kind of like a fun, homey atmosphere while you know that they're shooting in a set. I could replicate that easily. And so we kind of did. And that's the idea there. But we moved from the comic book store. We moved to the comic book store because I was like, we need a set. We need it to look like we're at a comic book store or something. I know. I'll get the comic book guy that I work with to let us shoot in his store. And that was fun. And I think it lent a lot of like production value to the show. But at the same time, we were limited by all kinds of uncontrollable aspects. For one, the walls between the building and the outside are thin.
Oh, yeah.
And so we were right next to a firehouse. And so if you watch the first, 25 episodes of back issues, you will hear a fire engine at some point in that show. For some reason, there were also a lot of bikers on that highway. So you'd hear a lot of motorcycles in it. There's also the whole aspect of we don't own the building and we don't have access to the heater. So there's one episode, I think it's All-Star Superman, where we're wearing coats. And it's because the heater's off and it's January.
Oh.
So at one point or another, we just said, you know, I'd really like to be able to have total control over my environment. And that was around the time when we were like, I guess we'll just start bringing the set into my home. And even though it will transform my house into a production office, it will at least allow us the versatility and the convenience of having a controlled environment. It's as simple as that.
Just before I happened to get grabbed into the studio, there was a product I picked up at a local comic book store. It's a copy of Conan the Barbarian on Power Records. Do you remember these?
Power Record? No, I don't remember those.
These were basically the entire comic book story with voice actors and sound effects on a record.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I remember when they tried to do digital, back before they actually made like digital comics, they were like, we're making digital comics. You had to buy a CD or a DVD, and they were like motion comics. I remember they were doing that, so I guess that's like an earlier version of it where you It's like a radio drama, more or less.
Yeah, basically. Some of them the smaller versions you got with a comic book, and then of course they put out the larger regular size records, which were just the stories that you kind of listen to, and it just caught my eye because it's a really imposing image of like Conan on a black horse, like riding over a bunch of people with flames behind him. It was $3.99. I was just like, I'm buying that today.
That sounds awesome. I mean, Conan is such a great image.
And they put them all out for like Planet of the Apes and Spider-Man, Thor, and Captain America. And of course, they did the monsters as well. So they had a Tomb of Dracula issue,
Nice.
a Monster of Frankenstein, Werewolf by Night, The Living Mummy, and then again a couple other science fiction fantasy ones. Like they did all 5 of the Planet of the Apes movies and Conan, because that's when Marvel was publishing everyone's property.
Yes, yeah. Marvel was kind of like the dark horse of its age, where or the IDW, where it's like, let's just get a whole bunch of commercial properties and put them out.
Now, for anyone who hasn't seen Sal's channel, like I said, go to Comic Pop on, just type in Comic Pop in the search engine on YouTube, and he does these tangents, and one of his most recent tangents, which is probably going to be at least a couple weeks old by the time we air this interview, is about Carnage, and me and Sal were talking about how I had Clayton Crane on my show a couple years ago, who was the artist who brought Carnage back to life. Now, I don't understand the marketing behind some of these comic books. Carnage #1. Do you know who's on the cover of that?
Which Carnage? Like Clayton Crane's Carnage?
Yes, his first series.
Oh,
it's Spider-Man and Iron Man.
Yes.
What the frickin' hell?
Well, because listen, the last time you saw Carnage before that, he was taken into orbit by a character that no one cares about now, named the Sentry, and ripped in half.
Basically, he's like modern-day Hyperion.
Yeah, so Carnage was, I think, considered to be unmarketable back then. And they're like, we can't sell a Carnage #1 that doesn't have someone else in it. It's like the old approach to comics where, you're going to introduce a new character? Okay, cool, but make sure Spider-Man shows up in it. So I think that was the approach.
Oh, you mean like they did with Meteor Man's miniseries back when the movie came out? They had Spider-Man show up in like the second issue?
Yeah, exactly. Or any character in the 90s where they're like, watch out, world, here comes Darkhawk, and his new friend Spider-Man will show up.
Actually, I loved Darkhawk in the 90s.
I was just actually showing Ben that the other day. He had a powerful mullet. Oh, no, that's not. Yeah, did he? Yeah,
no, he had regular hair, I think, but he just had a badass look to him.
Yeah,
and then the mystery of what his face looked like, you were like, what does his face look like?
Yeah.
And then they get to his origin, you're like, well, that's kind of cool. But then years later, they retcon in, no, these are the League of Assassins of outer space. And then Darkhawk himself, Chris Powell, kills the Empress Lilandra of the Shi'ar Empire.
Yeah, pretty cool. That's a cool direction for Darkhawk.
And you're like, but this is like after they had to explain, oh, do you remember there was a War Machine Max series and Darkhawk showed up in that? He was kind of a cannibal.
I honestly didn't read the War Machine Max series, but I did see it on the shelf and thought to myself, come on.
But it was like,
as I recall, they used like horrible CG for the art.
Uh-huh. And it was 99 cents an issue. So that's why I bought every issue. So I was like, 99
cents. If I had known it was 99
cents.
cents, I might have bought it.
Yeah. It was a wicked cheap comic because it was in black and white.
Oh, God.
So it might have been $1.99. But it was like a wicked cheap comic. I was like, I'll buy that. And it has like nudity in it and boobs and like, swearing. And you're like, well, this is definitely a Max book.
Yeah.
And like everyone's got, it's like a team of war machines led by Jim Rhodes, and Darkhawk's on the team. They're like, who's that? Oh, that's Darkhawk. His whole family's dead. And he's like spouting off the names of his 2 brothers because he had like 2 younger twin brothers. And then he shows up in Nova, and then that kind of carries over into the probably the longest running never resolved mystery in the X-Men universe, which was Sinister's letting slip brothers. Oh,
yes.
Did I say brothers?
Which Summers brother? Who is it? Oh, God.
And then, God, they should have just made it Gambit.
We've been thinking it's Gambit forever. I remember when it was implied it was Gambit, I'm like, because he's got concussive blast, he can make energy like Cyclops and Havoc can. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Like that. I don't know. It would have been Gambit's obviously a better choice than
Vulcan.
Vulcan, thank you.
Who's the emperor and married to Death's Hawk girl,
Deathhawk, Lady Hawk. I don't remember her name.
the
Oh, it's been-
Lalandra's psycho death sister.
Yeah, so lame.
Ugh. Which you can only imagine what Fox would have done with that in the movies.
There's a reason why the Phoenix turned into like a
Schizophrenic,
an alternate personality.
Yeah.
Right? I remember being actually the impetus behind our show Back Issues kind of was born out of X2 United, where we went to go see X-Men 2 in college. Not the guys, actually, just a different group of guys, but I was at college and I went to go see X2, and we got out of the theater, and like the last shot of the movie is
The Phoenix.
the silhouette of the Phoenix, like kind of under the water.
Yeah.
And they, my friends at the time were like, okay, man, you used to read comics, because back then I stopped reading for a while. And they were like, you used to read comics? What? Okay, I know there's a Phoenix, but what's the story there? And I go, okay, well, it all started out with the dethroned queen of the Shi'ar Empire named Lilandra. And they're like, stop, I don't care.
But you're like, you got a question. It's like, okay, so that shot's under the water, but it seems like a half a year to a year passes between the two films.
Yeah, well, that's
does she just fly around the water as the bird image of the Phoenix until they decide to go to the lake and find her psycho self?
It's terrible.
I guarantee. I would love Bryan Singer to just come out, because he's never really talked about it, but just come out and go, you know what was actually supposed to happen?
I would love to know what his X3 was supposed to be, because I guarantee you time travel was not a factor.
Yeah, well, I guess
My
maybe
guess
that's
is
what the
it's space.
90s X-Men movie, the next one's going to be about.
I'll take it. I'll take a movie set in the 90s in which the X-Men have to go into space and fight the Brood and the Shi'ar, unless Marvel gets any cosmic rights back from Fox, because that's the whole thing. Like, it's most of space is owned by Fox, or at least all the creatures that you like from space in Marvel.
Or what they'll do is, since Fox owns both the X-Men rights and the Alien rights, they'll just be like, how about we just get rid of the Brood and the X-Men fight the Xenomorphs?
I'll take that in a second. I'm just looking for cool properties to use the alien Xenomorphs in.
Because they're basically the Brood, just brown.
No, Ridley Scott should have sued, because damn, the Brood are a ripoff.
Did the Brood come after Alien?
Oh yeah.
Did they?
They had to have, right?
No. When was Giant Size X-Men '1 published? Because
that was the 60s.
Giant Size X-Men '1, the launch of the new X-Men team.
Yeah, that was it was like 74.
Okay, so that means then 10 issues later when the Phoenix shows up, and then 5 issues later, like, when does the Brood show up? Oh, the Brood doesn't show up until much later on. Never mind, you're right. Okay. Because the Brood don't show up until after Days of Future Past.
Yeah, okay, yeah, then no, the Brood, then Alien came first.
Okay.
Because the Brood were created in like 82, right? Then Alien came out.
And we're both
in,
on
70.
Skype, so we should be able to look on Marvel
true.
Wikipedia.
And Alien came out in like, I think 75. So, yeah, no, it's a ripoff. 79, but either way, yeah, no. Brooder, yeah.
Now, do you guys have
the Brood are cool?
Now, as like Tiffany, I'm really excited about Doctor Strange coming up. Are you guys going to be doing a bunch of Doctor Strange stuff when we get closer to it? Because you have one of your crew is so obsessed with Strange.
You can bet your eye of Agamotto we will be doing a lot of Doctor Strange.
Because I love it just when you mention Strange, like Tiffany just crawls into the shot.
Yeah, there's only one episode where that didn't happen recently, and it's because she was playing Diablo at the time. But yeah,
that's just like
The Oath, which I recommend to anybody. If anybody's like, oh, Doctor Strange, he seems lame, read The Oath and read, I think, Doctor Strange, Doctor Doom, Triumph and Torment, which we did on Back Issues, and that one starred Tiffany.
Yeah.
Those are the coolest Doctor Strange stories that I can think of off the top of my head.
With the exception of the one being printed right now.
Yeah. Well, that book is amazing.
Oh my god.
But
yeah.
Or just I like to think of like collected trades, because people are more willing to buy like a collected book than they are willing to buy like a monthly series that isn't done yet.
Yeah, true. Wasn't like Brother Voodoo Doctor Strange for a little while, and then I know he died.
Well, he was Sorcerer Supreme.
Yeah, he was Sorcerer Supreme, and then because Strange gave it up because he felt as though like kicking the Hulk into space and not being involved in Civil War and all the other crap he was pulling was just like, I am not worthy. And then of course in the end,
he just decides he wasn't worthy enough to be Sorcerer Supreme, and then just kind of like leaves for a while.
Yeah.
And I think that was when they were doing the Mark Waid series, The Doctor is Out. Strange.
And then like in the end, it's like the Ancient One that comes to him, who's just like, you've really proven, because you gave it all up, but you're still fighting the good fight. Guess what? That was the final test.
Bendis, who was writing New Avengers at the time and introduced the idea of Doctor Strange not being Sorcerer Supreme, was that Bendis wanted to do a story where Doctor Strange ultimately decided he wasn't worthy to be Sorcerer Supreme anymore, and he assumed that was such a rich and cool story that people would then pick it up and write it for him. No one did. And then he said, okay, then I guess I'll write it myself. And then promptly, killed Brother Voodoo and his
and then I heard he came back in Axis, but you guys don't cover that in your most recent episode.
We don't talk about it, but yes, Brother Voodoo does return.
Because of Doctor Doom, right?
Yeah, I skip over a few things in Axis just because why? Because who wants to talk about Axis for more than 20 minutes?
It's such a stupid. It ranks right up there with like DC's Convergence. Like they're banking on this being like the big title. I mean, they built Axis up really big with the whole the stealing of Professor X's body, very 1950s kind of story. And then I was like thinking, oh my god, this could actually go someplace really cool. The Red Skull, the clone of the original Red Skull, so it doesn't have all of the bogged down continuity of any of that other crap involving like he died of old age, he got cloned into Steve's body, he got repowered by the Cosmic Cube and Korvac, he came back, and then of course Sin shows back up. And if you read Sam Wilson's book, she fell off a cliff and her face was still disgustingly burnt off or whatever, but she's back and she looks fine, and she's calling the Red Skull Dad. And I'm like, what? But you gotta read.
Some of these writers just didn't read it or care.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, from like different interviews with more authors who don't care or have other things that earn them money, they go, Marvel editorial doesn't care about continuity. Like, as much as they lie to you and tell you that they do, like, they don't really care. Like, you can tell any story you want as long as they think it'll sell. And Axis is one of those situations. It's funny, like, that there's a plot thread that Axis picks up from Avengers Children's Crusade.
Yes.
And I was rewatching that episode, and in it I'm like, this is a love letter to continuity, because Avengers Children's Crusade is a good story that is knee deep in continuity, and Axis is a book that is also really, really dependent on like recent continuity, but it's really terrible. And I think that's just because they're like, make everyone think that continuity is bad. Like, show them why you shouldn't care about all the things that happened 20 years ago, because it'll get complicated and stupid. Also, we don't have X-Men anymore, so I guess we'll make Magneto not Wanda and Pietro's parent.
Oh, and in fact, we'll just make mutants no more anyway because of Death of X coming out soon.
I don't even know. Have we gotten any more information about what Death of X is supposed to be?
No, I mean the only thing we got in the Free Comic Book Day thing, which is, by the way, touches upon. But when I got the free issue of Free Comic Book Day, I remembered a joke from back issues. This was another reason I was like, I gotta get Sal on the show about this. Okay, so you buy the Free Comic Book Day issue, and at the back of the book, Gwen Stacy's hanging out with the Jackal, who actually looks like a jackal.
It could be a jackal. Well, it's definitely like kind of on the nose. We know it's clones,
but he doesn't look like a Green Goblin anymore.
Yeah, I think it's
which has been your biggest gripe every time you talk about the Jackal. He's like, doesn't look like a jackal. He looks like a goblin.
Yeah, he should be the Green Goblin. Yeah, jackals aren't really known for being green or looking like a gremlin.
That's what you said, a gremlin.
And then I remember, what's it called? In the Clone Saga, the 90s Clone Saga.
Yeah.
He like genetically modifies himself to be a jackal man, but he still just looks like a monster version of his stupid costume.
Oh, I think that artist who worked on Spider-Man, the adjective-free Spider-Man book at the time, during that little part of the Clone Saga where the Jackal comes out and he's all like, "Look at me, I'm all cool."
I'm Freakazoid now. I say hilarious pop culture references, and I'm a liar. Like,
the Spider-Man artist who tied into that book, I think the only reason, like, like half the time he was drawing the way he was drawing was so he could draw like because the Gwen Stacy clone or many clones of Gwen Stacy shows up in that Clone Saga drawn by that artist so many times, half nude, covered in smoke, so it hides the parts.
Yep.
Just to draw a half-nude Gwen Stacy with this like porn star style body, and you're like, what the F?
Yeah. The only thing that I like about the Clone Saga
just because he's married to a supermodel doesn't mean we need to draw the dead girlfriend like a supermodel with her Maxim style goods.
Give the people what they want. Show the half-naked supermodel, and then have her melt immediately following that. That way it's gross and stupid and weird.
And of course Ben and Peter are just standing there staring at the Gwen Stacy clone completely nude like, oh.
Yeah.
One of you should have like some girl locked up in jail who's you're still pining for, who by the way has a baby in the MC2 universe.
To that character from the Lost Years?
You know, that goes over to like Spider-Girl. It's just like, okay, so they keep going back into the Spider-Girl universe, so now she's called Spider-Woman. And I'm like, that's fine, because I love Mayday as a character. But there's still like secrets you have not gotten to yet. Like Dark Devil is in fact her half-brother with the Ben clone. And the mother was in jail, or the fact that Kane is Kane who kept popping up or whatever is like technically her deranged uncle who him and Peter are okay with now.
Yeah.
I mean,
he turned out to be okay, as it turns out, after Grim Hunt.
He became a much better character during the Spider Island storyline. In fact,
Spider Island, that was cool. Like when he falls into the anti-venom and he turns into a regular-looking Spider-Man, I was like, that's cool. I think, did we talk about?
You never done Spider Island yet.
We didn't do Spider Island, but I mentioned that he falls into the anti-venom, and they're like, well, why doesn't that rob him of his powers? And I'm like, well, because he's already a spider monster, and so it just took away the first outer layer. If he had fallen in without being a spider monster, he would have just lost his powers.
And that was one of the
monster.
And that was one of the best books of the Secret Wars was Spider Island. Because also the other thing that happens in that, which still hasn't happened in the comic books yet, is that Peter Parker still doesn't know that Venom is Flash Thompson, and Flash Thompson does not know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man still.
That's right.
Because he's Rom the Space Knight in space.
Yeah, he's Venom the Space Knight. I don't know what. Whatever.
And there's a Rom comic book series starting from IDW.
Well, yeah, the funny thing is Marvel got to keep the Space Knights, but IDW got Rom.
And Micronauts.
Yeah, so they can't call Rom a Space Knight, and they can't refer to Space Knights by Rom. And it's funny because if you ever look at, like, there was a new Avengers book that was actually like the prelude to Age of Ultron, where Rom the Space Knight lands in the Intelligentsia's, like, well, the Intelligentsia steals Rom the Space Knight. They don't call him Rom, but they call him a Space Knight, and it's drawn as Rom. And
yes.
Like, oh, Rom is in this book. Did they get the rights back? No, it's just Space Knights. We can draw him, but we can't call him Rom.
What a mess that was.
Meanwhile, your listeners are like, what is happening? Rom? It's an action figure.
Yeah, look it up, people. I mentioned it once or twice before, especially when it was Free Comic Day. I kind of plugged it. I didn't do a review of it, so anyone tuning in, yeah. Rom, you see a picture right here. If you're watching this on YouTube in a slideshow video, like most of the interviews are, here's a picture of Rom. Okay, there we go.
He's rad looking. That's kind of it.
So that's what we do. We basically take the interview and then we put it through slideshows. So we'll have a bunch of goofy pictures of Sal doing silly things.
Nice. Okay.
But it's like for every time comic books seem to be really good, they seem to be really bad, but we keep buying them. And one of the bad things that's happening soon with DC Comics is like, oh my God, thank you DC Comics, $2.99 a comic book, great. No, you're actually paying $6 a month for a comic book, and it's like, what the WTF?
Yeah. Well, I mean, are they reducing the page rate? Because I think it's the same number of pages.
Yeah, the same number of pages, but you're going to spend $6 a month because you have to buy it twice a month.
But you're technically getting more book.
Yeah, but still, it's like a cheap way of. It's like a cheating way of still being like, oh, well, we're rolling back for $2.99, but we're going to publish it twice a month.
Hey, listen, remember when Spider-Man was 3 times a month?
Oh my God, that was impossible to keep up with sometimes. And I'll be honest with you.
It was a great time to stop reading Spider-Man because so much of it was not worth reading.
No, but I'll be honest with you. Ever since I was 10 years old, I have never stopped reading Spider-Man. Not once. Clone Saga.
Probably every 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, Clone Saga, post Clone Saga.
I quit a Clone Saga.
No, I got that issue and I was just like, oh my god, Ben is the real Peter. I have to find out what's gonna happen
Yeah, it's
next.
funny because with me, I was like, Ben's the real Peter. Nope, and then jumped off the train, and then I picked up the issue where where they kill him. I was like, I want to see him die.
Issue 75, where he
Issue 75,
disintegrates.
Peter Parker, Spectacular Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And then I picked up another issue.
And like they killed him in a way like you don't come back from disintegration.
Dead. He was impaled by a goblin glider, and then fell off a building, fell onto a car.
And then Peter carries his ashes and dumps them in the river. And if you bought the trade paperback, they have the funeral. Like they have an extra 6 pages where it shows how Norman gets up out of the rubble.
Yep.
You see all the characters that were involved in the Clone Saga show up, including like the girlfriend who is like the daughter of the burglar.
Yes. Oh my God.
I mean, we're getting really obscure here, but
Yeah, did Jill Stacy appear in that one?
yes, she did too. Arthur, Stacy, but of course, Arthur and Jill showed back up later on.
Yes.
And their storyline was completed during another book that you haven't done yet, which you could do, which was an event book for Marvel, Maximum Security, where basically the Lilandra and the Council of Intergalactic People are just like, Earth is a big problem. Let's just set all the aliens there as a prison planet.
Yeah.
That was kind of cool.
It's a solid premise.
And it was only 3 issues, too. It was like 3 or 4 issues. It wasn't 8 to 12 issues long.
Yeah, unbelievably. They showed an amazing amount of restraint.
And yeah, everyone had a tie-in book, so every book had to fight an alien, but it was 1 issue. It wasn't like, oh, okay, so it takes Wolverine 6 issues to track down Nitro.
Yep. Yeah. But no, we can do it. It proves it depends on who's writing it. They could do, that was my main complaint with like House of M, for example. I was like, this is spinning its wheels. 8 issues, more like 4.
Do you go out of your way to find books that you love or books you hate?
I look for books that, first of all, that I either read or really, really wanted to read. I mean, like, I think I like talking about books that I like more than I like talking about books that I don't like. Because
you're more fun when you go off and you're just like, that was stupid. That was stupid.
I mean, like some things deserve to be, have had it coming.
Like the death of Superman is the best video.
Thank you. Well, I mean, it went off. It went off its own direction. Comics, those who ignore the past, as we've heard before, are doomed to repeat it.
Yes.
And the longer that you read comics, the more you realize there's nothing really new under the sun, or you've seen things before, and you remember when for Future's End they made all these holographic covers.
Oh,
and
what a terrible comic book!
Area bought all of them.
And how misled we were with Future's End with that free comic book day issue. When you got that free comic book day issue, you were like, wow, this is a cool story with Batman Beyond fighting the Borg kind of characters.
We called that, by the way. That we reviewed that on Off the Rag. We were like, this looks terrible. And by God, we were right.
Oh, you didn't like it in the beginning?
We did not like that Zero issue. We were like, I am not on board. I don't care. We didn't like the premise and the writing. We thought the writing was pretty poor.
Now, you know what you should do, because he just passed away yesterday. You should do Justice League New Frontier.
We've gotten a few people talking about it. I did a little I posted an image of one of my favorite cover images of New Frontier on our Instagram, and
I have every issue signed by Darwin.
Oh God, he was at Baltimore Comic Con last year, and I was like, holy crap! It's Darwin Cook. I gotta get him to draw a little something in my sketchbook, and he looked tired, and I thought to myself, no, I'm not gonna bother this man. I will wait. And now he's gone. He
had really aggressive cancer that nobody knew about until his wife posted about it.
And he so great. He's such a great artist, such a great creator. New Frontier is one of those things. It's a perfect comic book. And I own the hardcover. We've been meaning to do it for a few months. And I felt like if we do it now, it'll look like we're kind of like trying to capitalize on his passing, which I really don't want to do. I want to be able to say that we're doing the episode because I love this book, and it just so happened we lost him recently, and it really, really sucks. But some people have been kind of really supportive and being like, no, you should do it as a tribute, and I'm like, yeah, we'll see. I really. I don't think we have the clout. I don't think we have the size to be able to say, we're going to talk about Darwin Cook and his amazing book and blah, blah, blah. And, and without getting just nothing but negativity.
No, yeah, but I would love to see a channel do, because I mean, you can find like random things here and there, but I don't see it like on a lot of the channels I follow, like yours or Comics Explained, Historian, so on and so.
Yeah.
Joel's channel, Comic
Joel.
Nerd Sync.
Oh yeah, NerdSync.
Yeah, which by the way, one of his episodes, which I've emailed them a few times about, saying you gotta do this. Explain how the hell anything in Green Lantern still makes sense. That okay, so Superman dies, Hal goes crazy, becomes Parallax, Cyborg Superman, all that stuff happens, but in the New 52, Superman doesn't fight Doomsday and die. How the hell does all the continuity of Green Lantern still take place?
Well, they imply that he died. It's just that they don't care.
But
it's
the
just,
Cyborg
whatever, give me
Superman
money.
isn't even Hank Henshaw anymore. It's Supergirl's dad.
Yeah.
Which in the new upcoming Rebirth book, it's gonna be her dad still. Which is fine, you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be this wannabe Reed Richards who screwed up and killed his whole team. If
That
you
Hank
want
Henshaw reveal is gold, and I'm sad we're losing it, but I'm fine with an evil cyborg monster bad guy being Supergirl's dad. I don't know.
if you want Hank Henshaw to be Cyborg Superman, guess what? CW will guarantee probably put that in their new season coming up.
I thought that
Because they're going to be doing Supergirl.
Yeah. CW's taking over Supergirl finally,
which I think is fantastic. I mean,
yeah.
I'll admit I watch Supergirl because I like the way Melissa Benoist looks in the costume. I mean, I'll be a guy first and say she is a stunningly beautiful looking woman.
I think she does a wonderful job of retaining the spirit of what Superman and Supergirl and all prospects and
it's a fun show.
Should be. It should be a fun show. Superman needs to smile.
Yeah.
Supergirl, if he won't, then I'll take Supergirl smiling.
Yeah, and that's another reason I love the show. It goes hand. The two are equal. Again, I love. She looks beautiful in the costume, but at the same time,
I think it's a great design. Solid outfit.
I love the tights underneath the skirt and everything. It's not just like bare legs, which has always kind of like bothered me about Helen Slater's look. I'm like, cosplay like Superman.
It's like it was like
but she looks more badass with the tights, the pantyhose on for some reason.
Yeah.
But I don't know anything about fashion. I wear a comic book T-shirt. I mean, what the fuck do I know? But I talk to a lot of cosplayers, and they're like, "Yeah, no, I'm totally gonna start wearing tights and pantyhose underneath my skirt now."
Yeah, good.
On top of the fact, but legs aren't cold.
Yeah, stay warm. Exactly. Don't you talk about people hurting themselves or sacrificing themselves for the art. Like, I get it.
But it's the reason why I love The Flash and I hate Arrow. The Flash is also a really fun, happy show. And The Flash has been like consistently great. It's had its ups and downs sometimes, but more or less, it more has been consistently awesome and fun.
Right.
Most of the time, and especially when they bring in Mark Hamill and they bring in John Wesley Shipp and they have Dr. McGee playing that actress playing Dr. McGee again. You're like, oh, that's so cool.
You could tell the people who are making Flash are having a really great time. And I think that you can't get a show like The Flash without first having Arrow.
Yeah.
Like, you needed them to go, like, we gotta have a green Batman, here he is. And then they do that show, and then they go like, okay, well, we're gonna do The Flash next. And they're like, oh, I don't care, fine, whatever, do whatever you want. And they're like, okay, I'll have fun, I'll enjoy it. Like, Flash should always be happy and smiling, and he shouldn't be if anyone should not be frowning, brooding, and miserable, it's the Flash.
Yeah, no, I mean he should always, and now that he's gonna have now that Supergirl is going to be in the same show, I don't know how they're going to merge the universes together and just say, "Oh, look, the universe is merged," and it's like the ultimate universe with Marvel. We just, Miles has always been in the Marvel universe. He's always
been here now. I feel like.
But how has he turned into Spider-Man? They have not revealed yet.
They hinted. I mean, they could just I was like, well, maybe they could replace him with Silk, or replace Silk with him. Somebody else got bit by the spider, but no.
No, it's just but
they've already done that spider story a million times. By the way, we all know that Silk couldn't have been bitten by the radioactive spider because, I think a janitor or something eats the spider and becomes the 1,000.
Yes, the web spinners, the first web spinners. That was the first time you found out Peter. There was a worse bully than Flash Thompson that made Peter eat dog shit.
Yeah, that's right. If you ever want to see a book if you want to see a Spider-Man book written by Garth Ennis, read that.
Yeah,
read the 1,000. It's so awful.
And then there was Spider-Man: The Lost Years,
Yes.
This is when him and Mary Jane moved to Portland. He got a science job so they could give birth to the baby without all the baggage of Spider-Man.
Yep.
And he found out the spider that would bit him is like still alive, or it's not alive, but it's being tested on,
Right.
or something like that.
That's a solid premise too. Any of those were better ideas than what we got. But who knows where Miles get his powers now? I don't know.
And then, well, I mean, in the most recent issue with his grandmother showing up, she mentions his Uncle Aaron, which was the
Yes.
Prowler in the other universe, and the
Yeah.
reason why he's Spider-Man. So, but the Prowler is obviously Hobie Brown because, the whole purpose of the new Amazing Spider-Man book is to go, hey, Spider-Man has a cast of other characters besides the women he bangs.
Yes.
He has the Prowler. He has...
That'd be cool if Hobie Brown was in some way related to Miles Morales. I'd be okay with that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, totally. I liked the fact they brought back Harry Osborn, because it was just like, well, you brought him back to life, and then he went away. What?
I hate the fact they brought back Harry Osborn in a big bad way. Spectacular Spider-Man 200 is, for me, so emotionally rewarding in such a real and sad way.
Did you cry reading it?
It was rough, yeah.
Yeah. Is that like the one book you've ever cried reading?
No,
Oh.
I've cried reading many books, but it's just that one hit me on a really personal place. I was like, this is a real story about friendship. It's really hardcore.
Did you
But,
have a lot of connection to it as a?
I do. It's funny.
Without getting too personal, but did you lose somebody? Is basically what I'm trying to ask.
No.
Okay, all right.
Look,
How deep are we going to get here, Sal, with this conversation?
Did someone die in your life? Or, knock wood, have lost anyone to that degree?
You just break down. It's like the most human episode of my show ever.
Yeah, right. No, it's just a solid book. And when they brought him back, they promised to tell stories that they could finally tell with a living Harry Osborn. And they did a bunch of nonsense, and then he went away, and then they brought him back to try and use him again, and then he went away, and then they brought him back to try and use him again, and he'll just go away again. It was like them bringing back Kraven the Hunter. They're like, we finally got Kraven the Hunter. We've done 3 stories with him, and none of them are good.
Yeah, they have done nothing. I mean, I thought it was very dark how they brought him back, and I was kind of like, I'm not sure how I feel about this.
I was hoping it wasn't going to work. I thought that the whole thing would be cool if they ended it with, no, human sacrifices don't work.
Oh, like it's a big failure.
It's a big failure. They backed the wrong horse. You see him occasionally will crop up, and there's no reference to him being dead or resurrected or.
Like, he should be on a mission because he doesn't want to be alive. He should be on a mission to be like, Spider-Man, I'm gonna kill your Aunt May, so you kill me.
Yeah, that's the only thing I liked about that book was that Kraven's like, why did you bring me back? I killed myself.
Yeah, and he can't die unless Spider-Man does it. And I'm like, well, then start writing a story where Kraven, who knows Peter Parker is Spider-Man now, goes on a killing spree of Spider-Man's friends and enemies. You kill off one major Spider-Man character that will eventually get brought back.
Spider-Man.
But it really tries to push Peter over the edge to kill him. And Peter comes to that moment. He's like, no. Can't do it. You killed my Aunt May, but she wouldn't want me to kill you.
Yeah, no, I'll just stick you in a. I'll you know what? I'll use my interdimensional transporter and drop you off in that weird world with radiation with the inheritors. You can hang out there.
Yeah. You gotta wonder how long Aunt May's husband has, because the men in Aunt May's life don't last that long.
No, Uncle Ben, Nathan Lubinsky. It's not looking too good for her.
No, that mobster that she dated back in that Spectacular Spider-Man annual. Yeah.
Doc Ock.
What's funny is that right after it's a really cool joke I posted on Facebook, but when they announced Peggy Carter's series was canceled, season 2 was being officially canceled, and everyone's like, oh, Netflix is gonna pick it up. I said, oh, but don't fret, just watch her continuing adventures in Captain America: Civil War. Aww. Man, oh man, did I get some
Yeah.
Not like you spoiled the movie, but dude, you're an asshole.
Yeah, that's sad. That was a rough moment. I was like, that's all right, fair enough. She was 95 when we saw her in Winter Soldier, and she's like, ugh,
dying of Alzheimer's.
That was not what I was prepared for. I'm like,
no, but
she makes it, but she's losing it.
But maybe she'll come back because of the Infinity Gauntlet will screw up time and space.
I have a feeling they're not going to bring back Peggy Carter.
Oh, no, you never know. Maybe Captain America will get a hold of the Infinity Gauntlet and he'll need a new army. So he summons the Howling Commandos and Peggy and they go charging into battle.
I mean, here's the thing. They've already wasted Cap's cosmic cube resurrection of Bucky.
Yeah.
Could have done. By the way, not wasted. He's a great this Winter Soldier is an amazing movie, and it's a great integration of Bucky into the MCU, and it's awesome. It works out great. But I love that moment in Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes, which is I think one of the best adaptations of Marvel Comics in media. Is that cartoon show, and in it.
Cap
wishes for him to have not died, and so he doesn't. But as a result, he became the Winter Soldier instead. I'm like, that's solid. That's a solid way to reimagine. I think Chris Yost wrote that show along with Man of Action. That was a good show.
There was I predict once we finally get to the year 8 Avengers, whatever it's going to be called now, Infinity something another, because they're not calling it the war.
They changed the name.
I really hope to start seeing character profile posters of the different Avengers holding the Infinity Gauntlet.
Oh, that'd be cool. That's a cool way to do it.
Don't do up the background in a way that's like their Utopia with giant Stark towers anywhere, but just have each one of the actors with the gauntlet on their hand, just to be like, oh my god, these posters are going to sell like crazy on the back market.
Yes. I would totally be okay with that. I would love a Spider-Man poster of him holding the thing. It was just a tagline, using their lines, great power, great responsibility.
Yeah, or...
I'm on board with that premise.
Oh my god. Well, Sal, we've had you on for so long. Why don't you give away all of your social media so people can find you? And you have a Pantheon thing also, I know, so why don't you plug that too?
Sure, absolutely. Well, you can find us directly at comicpop.net. You go there, it'll take you to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/TV Little House, because that's what we used to be called before we changed the name about a year ago. Comic Pop is a great place for you to go and you watch 5 different shows for 5 days. It's a great show or a great channel with a lot of great stuff. Conversations about comics, character profiles. You can also check us out on Twitter. You can read what I have to say on a daily basis at Sal Says What. We also have an Instagram, Comic Pop Official. Everything actually is found through our through the main page. If you go to the channel, right there on the top right-hand corner, there's our t-shirt store. There's our Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/comicpop, you can support the channel /shows on a monthly basis. It's like a Kickstarter that never ends. And we have a plethora of incentives and behind-the-scenes info that we like to give to our patrons on a weekly basis. Every week I pop in and I send them a message that says hey gang, here's what's happening. You get an inside info, and if I have access to if I have early access to videos that are going to come out in the next day or two, I will often throw them to the people on Patreon first, just as another way to say thank you for supporting us and helping us make this a full-time job.
So, and one last thing, since Back Issues is probably your most popular show, and by the time we air this, the other episodes will have come out. But can you give us a hint of? Can you at least tell us maybe 3 definite event books that you're going to do between now and December 31st?
Okay, between now and 2017, we'll definitely have done Superman, Emperor, Joker.
Oh, so good. Such a screwed up story.
Yeah.
For Batman.
We'll definitely probably have done. Oh man, there's a lot of books I want to do. You know what? But before 2017, we'll definitely
Tomb of Dracula.
We will definitely have done Justice League New Frontier by that point. And we'll have done Doctor Strange: The Oath.
Yep. Just in time for the movie.
And we might just see an episode of Runaways on that channel.
Oh, yeah. The Joss Whedon Runaways or Brian K. Vaughan?
Brian K. Vaughan.
I'm
not doing the Joss Whedon Runaways.
Oh, yeah. I only read Brian K. Vaughan stuff. I'm reading his Paper Girls right now.
Paper Girls is apparently fantastic. I haven't read it yet, but Tiffany has, and it's she loves it.
Yeah, she's absolutely right. It's a fantastic book. So
yeah, art's great. Writing, of course, is Brian K. Vaughan, so it can't go wrong. Although I'm not a huge fan of Y the Last Man. I read it, but I wasn't engrossed. I wasn't hooked like everything else he writes.
Thank God they never made that into the movie starring Shia LaBeouf they were planning to.
Oh. Yeah, that's a decision.
After watching Shia LaBeouf and Eric from Thor in Nymphomaniac Volume 1 and 2, I'm done. I will never watch another Shia LaBeouf thing ever again.
He wasn't bad in the Constantine movie.
That's right, he was in the Constantine movie, and his character just showed up in the Marvel Universe for the first time.
Really?
in Standoff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. I thought you meant he was in an MCU movie and I didn't see
No,
it.
no. I'm
What?
sorry. Yeah, he's in Standoff, volume Alpha or Omega, but he's kidnapped by
yeah.
Baron Zemo in the end. So
Right, that's Omega. Yeah.
yeah, so that's his first kind of in continuity appearance. So I wonder if he'll have any interaction with Thor, Goddess of Thunder, Jane Foster.
I hope so. Man, let me tell you, by the way, I would be 100. Like, I hear that, Hemsworth is kind of interested in leaving or at least taking a break. I'd be 100% on board with Natalie Portman picking up the hammer.
That would be so good. What about
I think they would keep her.
With the cancer backstory?
That'd be fine. You could do that.
You think about all the readers out there who have breast cancer, who survived breast cancer. Think about, not to use tragedy to sell books, but from a marketing standpoint. You would sell.
It would sell. You could sell it either way. Natalie Portman is a household name that sells tickets, kind of. So,
like with stories with people writing in the back, like they did with that Flash Thompson Spider-Man issue, where he comes back from the war and he has to have his legs amputated.
Yeah.
Really, like such a touching story. Do like the lead-in book for that, where you base it on maybe someone else's story. Pick a reader who survived, or unfortunately maybe lost their battle, and turn that into Jane Foster's story, for the movie or something like that. Make it a tribute. I'm thinking way too far ahead for Disney, but they do things like that once in a while. You never know.
True. No,
So,
I agree with you.
And I tweeted out, after I'd done reading Volume 1 of Goddess of Thunder, I tweeted out, and Aaron Archer tweeted back actually, "Oh my God, thank you so much. I really appreciate that." Because I said, this is one of the best damn comic books out there. This is so much fun to read. The female Thor, with her inner monologue as Jane Foster, but everything she says is "Thou art the yield English" every 5 minutes. And I love her relationship with Freya, Thor's mom. Oh, so fantastic. So
it's a great book. Also, of course, just if you're going to talk about Marvel books that are great that no one's reading, read Vision.
Yeah.
Great. Keep it up.
Read Doctor Strange. Oh my God. By the way, if you're a big horror fan, since we cover a lot of horror on the show, the only really horror comic book Marvel has out is Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
Because of Tim Seeley's unfortunate Blade book never happening.
Oh, that's right. The female Blade.
His daughter. It was supposed to be his daughter.
Whatever happened to that? They just didn't reference it again.
I have asked him, and he says he can't talk about it.
That's amazing. Maybe they're doing a show or something. I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, Tim's been on the show a couple times, but I tweeted him when I heard it got canceled, and he was kind of not talking about it. Maybe it's
I'm
a
looking
source.
at it right now. There's a new hunter in town, and she's raising the stakes.
Yeah, but maybe it's a sore spot. Maybe it was because he made a big joke saying, "Oh, I spent the last 15 years writing teen goth girl books, aka hack slash," and so Marvel was just like, "You know something about teen girl angst? Write our Blade book." And he's like, "Sure," which is kind of true. If you read hack slash, you're like, if anyone should be writing this Blade teen girl book, it should be the guy who wrote hack slash, because for horror fans, hack slash is awesome.
What a cool idea, and I hope it comes off the ground sometime.
And Tim took his love of like goth girls and Buffy the Vampire Slayer and like combined them together.
Yeah, making a Marvel Buffy book in the Blade universe is a really, really good premise. I'm surprised it didn't sell.
Well, again, thank you so much, Sal.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.